Once Millier had made some distance, U gave Stream a summon to kill Lily. Joilbe was very surprised by this. The teacher was barely able to carry both weapons, but managed to make her way back to the entrance of the academy. U stepped forward and without saying a single word, closed her eyes. Is she really going to? This said while she stared at U. Faran was a bit concerned by this, but appeared to be eager for it to happen. U reopened her eyes once she was ready. The temperature of U's body began to drop drastically, an aura that no spell could penetrate. Her body was absorbing all of the heat around the platform, making it almost impossible for magic to gather magical energy from the environment. Millier, who was the closest to, felt the cold reaching a point that was almost unbearable. The leaves, flowers, and apples all around the platform began to freeze, killing them in the process. Given the circumstances, ending this fight as soon as possible is in your best interest, Joilbe said as he kept all of his arms behind his back. Little by little, a thin layer of snow started to materialize. Around a centimeter away from her body, this layer would then engulf U in what appeared to be a dress. A spell that only U had been able to cast since the fire rain happened, and was considered one of the 3 known magical incantations that were the pinnacle of anti-magie. Isn't that right? It resembled a wedding dress with the commander's contour, which compelled Maggie to nickname U in a particular way, one that she hated from the bottom of her heart, Bride of Ataraxia. Named the Frozen Thread Overcoat in the old world, only a few anti-magi had been able to reach this state. A veil that offered no offensive or defensive capabilities and was the byproduct of pushing their bodies to the absolute limit. U clenched her fist, materializing a weapon in her hand, a cold-hearted instrument that had no shape at all. Parts of it could melt as U kept trying her best to give it form. Dirty eyes that would be almost always imperfect, with a deep dark blue hue that didn't allow any light to scatter within. This weapon would eventually morph into a longsword. The surface was fragile and had more than a few cracks along its edges. The grotesque blade, Faran said, fascinated by it, a weapon that only a few people had laid eyes upon. There's a good reason that you are a favorite to join us, bride, Joilbe said. Even though you are an anti-magus, I can see why constellatio will gladly accept you into our ranks, he finished. U didn't respond to any of his words. She had barely paid attention to them. Her energy was spent conjuring the coat and weapon. The first person that was able to cast a spell after the fire rain had the right and obligation to name it. If the spell had already been documented in the old world, it would keep its name until it was performed again after the fire rain. U refused to give it a name, since it was something that brought her a lot of pain. For her being called bride was pure mockery. U took a battle stance and she angled her body to both sides and bent her knees. With both of her hands squeezing the weapon's handle, she kept it down, aiming towards the floor in a perfect 45-degree angle. Do you want to freeze to death, Constellatio? Because that's what you're about to get, Millier said as she swung her spear horizontally and pointed at Joilbe. U's bodyguard quickly started flying down to intercept Faran's wyvern, which had already dealt with the third one. They were trying their best to keep their distance from the wyvern, so they wouldn't get thrown off their mounts. U took advantage of the situation to jump into action. She dashed towards Joilbe at such a speed that her dress couldn't keep up with her. Her body exited the cold mist of her coat as she dashed towards the constellatio. U's aura was such that even the people on the platform above could feel the cold wind hit their bodies as soon as she jumped into action. Joilbe's smile soon faded away as he noticed U pick up speed as she was dashing towards him. The blade began to shrink in U's grasp, allowing her to move even faster. Oh shit! I don't think I can block this fast. Who moved her now smaller blade in front of her and grabbing the other end with her other hand, splitting the weapon in two short swords, which she used to cut through Joilbe's forearms with two downward slashes. He had been tricked by once again, however he was ready this time. His body was coated in an artificial anti-magic spell, two rings, one in each hand, shone bright the moment he was caught, preventing from sealing his magic. Joilbe's third arm reached out on its own once more, whose blade encountered the arm in a horizontal position as they moved downwards, pushing themselves deep in Joilbe's flesh. Another ring on his third arm's hand activated as well. U's swing had a strong momentum, and even so, his third arm easily pushed upwards. The motion was so strong and quick that U wasn't able to release her weapons in time, sending her arms flailing upward. This threw her off balance and exposed her chest. Joilbe was able to land two punches with his free hand, right on her collarbones before she could properly go into a defensive stance. U flew backwards, mostly with the help of the punches. The shield that Millier had placed on her body managed to protect her. Joilbe became aware of her protection just now, which made him look quite annoyed. Since it was his normal arms, the ones that dealt the punches, even without Millier's protections, they would haven't been able to take her out, but she would have been badly hurt. It was now just a matter of time before the remaining shield was depleted, and now the man was aware. She had to proceed with caution. Millier made her way towards where Faran was and attacked him, something that Joilbe noticed right away. U continued attacking Joilbe, so he had no other option but to disregard Millier for now. Oh, he can defend himself. we have bigger fishes to fry. Faran was quite agile for someone his size and was able to avoid most of Millier's attack, but was eventually forced to block the spear with his hand. Now I would rather jump off this platform than to be arrested by you all, Faran said as he grabbed onto the spear with both hands. Millier stared at Faran intensely. Their strength was similar because of the large amount of magic she absorbed earlier, making it impossible for Faran to take the spear off her hands. After struggling for a few seconds, Faran pulled on the spear, and with it, Millier. Millier tried her best to keep her balance, but by the time she was properly on her feet, Faran already had her within the active range of his spell, pulling her towards him as soon as he opened his arm. Acting quickly, she activated a barrier around her body, which quickly separated her from Faran by a few inches. The barrier felt slippery in Faran's embrace, something he wasn't expecting as he continued to apply force. Millier simply moved downwards and tackled the man in his stomach. Faran remained on the floor, feeling Millier's heel on his chest a moment later. So this is just watching this going down. It's like, I am putting my hands on this shit. She aimed the tip of her spear right in his face. Chief! Liz cried as she tried to step forward in order to help Faran. She felt a sharp pain on her right leg, forcing the woman on her knee once more. After growling at Millier for a second, the man channeled the magical energy within his body, as he wasn't allowed to grab any from the environment because of U's seal. Millier noticed this and was able to embrace herself. Faran smashed the platform underneath him with both of his fists while laying down, producing the same screech as before. The shockwave produced sent Millier flying backwards and sliding on the platform. Her foot stomped just a few centimeters away from the border. She took a deep breath. It was proving to be challenging to immobilize Faran on her own. She was clearly the superior combatant, but the platform size made it dangerous to approach a man with those kinds of spells. U approached Joilbe once more with caution this time, since she wasn't going to get away with something as bold as before. She increased her short sword's range enough to keep Joilbe at a safe distance. Just a few seconds into resuming their fight, Joilbe had become accustomed to the pace of the battle. He was feeling confident about launching a counterattack, with his third arm being the catalyst. The moment that thought crossed his mind, he felt a sharp pain in his chest. Ua tricked him into a false sense of security and punctured his chest with her weapon, which she had turned into a rapier. With each quick swoop, a shard encrusted into his chest, breaking the weapon in the process. U quickly reforged the weapon before thrusting again. It was superficial damage, but it was more than enough to seal his magic since his rings weren't ready yet to activate again. Combined with the magic suppressing aura that U was using to keep her cover on, Joilbe only had his own magic reserves and rings available to cast spells. He understood perfectly why he was losing this fight, even though her snow code wasn't offering any magical enhancements to U. It soon dawned on him the reason why his third arm wasn't operating properly. If U remained fighting in a single spot for long enough, her snow coat would spread, making it impossible to know the exact location of her arms and legs, and a deceiving smoke curtain. Joilbe's third arm required his eyes for it to work, so he couldn't predict U's footwork. He was doomed to always have a useless arm that wouldn't do its job. Even though he was destined to lose this fight, he had a strangely happy expression on his face. He moved away from U's range by doing a few backflips as soon as he could. The commander wasn't expecting the man to get away from her, so he slipped right through her attacks. They stared at each other for a few seconds. U turned the rapier into a short one and claws on her left hand's fingers. She took a different stance while preparing for Joilbe to attack. "You're enjoying this. This was never about Faran," U said to the man who kept a smile on his face. Joilbe was profusely bleeding from the holes on his chest and the two wounds on his forearms. "Why? Why are you doing this?" U asked. Joilbe didn't respond to either question and took a combat stance once more. "If you wanted to test your strength against me, you have your answer now. You lose," U said. Joilbe licked his lips, finding blood that he had coughed up earlier. The man looked at the giant tree for a moment, appearing to be distracted with his own thoughts. U stared at Joilbe, confused as to why he would stop paying attention to their fight. Before U could even think the right word to say to him, Joilbe looked in the direction with a lot of determination in his eyes. Joilbe clenched his fist and dashed towards U. It wasn't clear what the man was trying to do, but U wasn't going to allow it, as desperate as his actions were. U waved her hand and hit the man with a huge pillar of snow that materialized right on his path. Joilbe had used his third arms to push through the violent force of the pillar, doing a somersault as soon as he landed. His third arm, while broken in 4 different places, was partially operational. He kept pushing forward and running towards U. This forced U into a defensive stance. It all happened in a flash, with U not understanding how those seconds went by so quickly. In her mind, it was obvious, yet she couldn't help but to blame herself as to why she was so oblivious. Her gaze focused on Joilbe's third arm, arcing away after being cut off by her claws. Joilbe had sacrificed his third arm to approach her one last time. U's entire body felt so light, as if she was forced out of the snowy protection of her coat. She was tackled by him as soon as her attack was over. Before she could say, do, or even think anything, she was already in midair. Joilbe had pushed her along himself off the platform. "I'm doing this contract no matter what!" The sudden gasps from the people above made Millier look in the direction of U and Joilbe. "What is going on? Holy shit!" "Oh!" Millier screamed, throwing her spear as soon as she could. It landed right at the edge of the platform, creating a spherical barrier in an attempt to catch them both. Millier forgot all about Faran as she quickly ran towards the edge. She looked over the edge of the platform just to find her barrier empty. Millier couldn't believe her eyes and remained there in shock. Only one of U's bodyguards was there, plunging downwards with his wyvern, trying to catch them, but it was too late. U felt the moistness of the grass underneath her head. A strong wind current would come and go. teasing her face. Her cold was still active, creating a cold mist that covered the grass around her. Her vision was blurry, but eventually she was able to focus onto the several big objects. The shadow of the giant tree made it clearer to do so. She looked to her right and found the ginormous branches of Lupomo partially covered in moss. Not far from there. There were flowers too, red and aqua. The wind made them dance for her. To her left, she found a beautiful pasturelands that surrounded the academy. The colors were so vibrant, she couldn't stop thinking about how she had never seen something like that before. Her memories were fuzzy, but she managed to at least understand where she was. She moved her hands onto her stomach and examined her body with her fingers. Something had poured through her damaged gloves. It was warm. She came to the realization that she might be hurt. Upon bringing her hand up to her face, she noticed blood on her fingertips. Because of her state of mind, she wasn't alarmed by this at all. Her leg felt heavy. Something was crushing it. The screech of several wyverns could be heard in the distance, and eventually appeared in U's blurred sight. She took a deep breath and lowered her hands on the grass. Joilbe's corpse was lying over her leg, bleeding from every orifice in his face. It was hard to tell for U, but she understood that whatever was crushing her wasn't something she wanted to look once she stood up. Why? Why am I still here? U said as she kept her gaze onto the branches right above. Right, Fortress, end of chapter 2. Well, I'm glad we I'm glad we played until this was done. Well, read, but you know what I mean. Yeah, well, there's always like a preview on next chapter or something, so let us check. The Foxtrot Towers had grown silent. It was already past 2 in the morning. Millier and Reisu were standing in the care unit of the tower. Not a word had been spoken since they arrived. They were both deep in thought about what happened at Lupomo. Reisu was looking through one of the windows of the tower, looking at the city down below. A door opened near to where they were, with U walking through it. She closed the door with her body still angled towards it. Millier and Reisu looked at each other. They didn't know her state of mind, so they waited for her to speak. They said he will survive, but he probably won't be able to walk again, U said in a slightly broken voice. The commander still has tears rolling down her cheeks. U walked right next to the door and placed her back against the wall. She wiped her tears a few moments later. Her eyes were puffy from crying. Reisu sighed deeply. He lost a lot of blood. I really didn't think he would make it, Reisu said as he remembered the scene. Nate was with him when it happened. That's the only reason why he was able to survive, Millier said as she approached U. U kept her eyes on the floor. She made a promise to herself not to cry when it comes to Vin, but she never thought that if she was to do it again, it would be for a reason like this. Why? Why would he do something like this? U said to herself. Neither of the commanders that accompanied U knew how to respond. This was all my fault. Why didn't I notice before? U said before covering her face with both hands. If you mean not feeling pain from being hit, that will mean that I'm to blame as well, Millier said out loud, which made U quickly look towards her. That is not, U complained. Exactly. You're looking for a very petty reason to blame yourself, just like I did, Millier said. This made U reflect on her previous words. Adrenaline is quite deceiving. Sometimes makes pain non-existent, Reisu said. In this kind of situation, it isn't healthy to look for someone to blame. It was his decision after all, Millier said. U stared at Millier for a moment before responding. I need to go, U said with very open eyes. She probably already knows every detail, but please go speak to her, she said before walking away from the pair. Reisu and Millier looked at U leave without saying a word. They couldn't bring themselves to stop her from leaving. After hearing a knock on the door that late into the night, Amber was well aware of who it might be. He quickly reached for the door, and without even checking who was outside, he opened it. A great weight was lifted off his shoulders upon seeing Uwe standing on the other side of the door. "Oh, you came back so fast," Amber said as he quickly approached with a huge smile on his face. His smile soon faded as he examined Uwe's expression. "Can we talk?" Uwe asked. He took notice of the state of mind Uwe was in. "Yes, of course," said a very confused and worried Amber. Amber moved outside of his home and closed the door soon after. Now that he was close to, he was able to spot a few bruises on Uwe's face, as well as her beaten-up uniform. Uwe moved closer, hugging Amber as soon as he could. Amber slowly wrapped his arm around her. "Tell me, what happened?" Amber asked after caressing her head. Uwe began sobbing. She had been crying all the way back to Foxtrot. "Did you get hurt?" Amber asked. Her silence concerned him. Uwe shook her head. "I am fine, that's the problem," Uwe said between sobs. Amber was very confused by Uwe's words and allowed her to continue. "Vin put a jinx on me, indirectly. I don't remember when such a thing could have happened, and I don't think it is important to know at this point," Uwe continued, explaining. Amber was surprised, but said nothing. "I should have died. I was so careless, so stupid. I should have foreseen something like that," Uwe said, all while squeezing her chest with her right hand. "That's the fatal blow I received, being channeled into his own body. He tried his best to redirect it to a path of his body that wouldn't instantly kill him," Uwe explained with a voice that was starting to break. That," Amber muttered, not quite sure what Uwe was saying. Uwe placed her hand on her face. "If it had been anyone else, he would be dead right now," Uwe cried. Amber was deep in thought, trying to process what Uwe just explained to him. "So, he's alive at least," Amber said and grabbed Uwe's hand, trying to comfort her. Uwe nodded slowly. "If he hadn't done that, you..." Amber said while squishing her hands. Uwe simply nodded while tears rolled down her face. It took Uwe almost a minute to calm down and to continue to communicate what was on her mind. "I killed someone," Uwe said before opening her eyes. "Mr. Amber, are you okay with someone like me? Someone that has killed many people in the past? I will understand if you wouldn't want someone like me close to you or your child," Uwe said while looking at the man. Amber was slightly shocked by Uwe's statement. He had thought about it before, and Uwe made it sense that Uwe might have to take some tough decisions in her life, including taking someone else's. The man sighed a bit before responding, his shocked expression changing to a soft smile. "You forget where I come from. I was involved with the creation of weapons, and I know better than most people how much harm this kind of job can lead to," Amber explained. "I'm no stranger to the concept of death. You did what you had to, and risked your life to save the people that were at the academy," Amber continued. "You are of the few people that truly makes me believe that there is a legitimate reason for my weapons to exist, when they are in the hands of people like you," Amber said before grabbing Uwe by the shoulders. "There's no way I would want you far from us," Amber said with a smile. After a short pause, Amber continued. "I have killed people too. If you think about it, I also feel responsible for any of the deaths my weapons may have caused," Amber said. Uwe wiped her tears. Her gaze moved onto the ground and stayed there for a while. She eventually looked at Amber in the eyes. "Vin and I fought last night, after the meeting. He said that I should reconsider going, that the commanders that were on their way were enough to deal with the situation. Stupid me took it as an insult, as if he was saying that I wasn't good enough," Uwe said. "I reacted badly, as I usually do when it comes to him," Uwe said before growing silent for a moment. "He knew very well that I would fail. He knew that my mind and heart were somewhere else," Uwe finally said. "Somewhere else?" Amber asked, quite confused. "Anywhere but in this uniform, more than anyone else. He knew that I didn't want to fight anymore, that this isn't my job anymore," Uwe explained. "He probably just wanted to protect you. You said it yourself. You didn't feel ready to take on this job, not because you aren't capable, but because you weren't ready," Amber said. "The day something happens to you, he probably would blame himself for not being there. I say this because I have noticed how protective he is of you. I bet he still loves you, Amber continued. Who responded almost immediately, as if those words were something she wanted to protect herself from. He doesn't love me, just like I don't love him anymore. He didn't even bother to come visit me during the 5 years I spent in retirement, Wu explained. It confuses me. Why would someone that seemingly doesn't care about you give their life away for you? Wu asked herself while hugging Robin her own arms. Amber didn't know how to respond. It was something he didn't feel comfortable even trying to guess. I was wrong about Vin, but even though he still cares, it doesn't make me feel any different regarding my feelings for him, Wu said. Love has many forms, Wu, Amber replied. You spent many years together, Amber said. Do you think that this love he felt for you wouldn't push him into protecting you? Would you have allowed someone to hurt him if the roles were the other way around? Amber asked. The face of Wu was all Amber needed as an answer. She would protect Bean, even after all that had happened. Both of you were prepared to die today. With his arm broken, he probably knew this was the only way he could have done something. He knows you have a lot of road ahead, even though you don't share that sentiment, Amber said. But what about him? It isn't fair that I'm the only one that came out unscathed from this, Wu said. Do you really? Amber asked. Wu stared at Amber for a moment, before looking down at her feet. Bean probably knew you would react this way, and that both of you would have to carry different kinds of hurt, Amber said. Wu didn't know what to answer. Her body and mind were too tired at this point. She began to cry once more. This time, she couldn't even tell what she was to cry about. Wu moved close to Amber and hugged him once more. Can I stay with you tonight? As long as you need, Amber said, since Wu was much taller than him. Caressing her back was a bit awkward, but he did so anyways. Thank you, Mr. Amber, Wu said before closing her eyes and continued sobbing. Alright, well, I'm surprised. I don't know, I mean, I knew it was going to be done like at one point or another, but you know, I feel kind of surprised that I'm actually done with this for now. How many chapters do you think there's going to be? I don't know. Well, I guess it needs to be considered what they are trying to solve. Because well, it's because I mean, you know, when you're trying to think of a story, it's like what? The story of a specific characters. Also, I'm going to lower the volume for a minute. Hopefully it doesn't throw off whatever audio mixing I'm doing. It always does. Because I mean, the story can be about the protagonists, I mean, Michi and Yuki. But the story can also be about the world within, you know, about the things that happen. Well, because I mean, we sent Michi and Yuki of their quest or whatever into the next thing. Oh yeah, Yuki's you know, you do your job or whatever, grow up and things like that. But but there were other things going on. Alright, well, and where do I start? Where do I start? Alright, I like the second chapter or episode, you wanna call it. Yeah, episode. A chapter, like it was Fortnite. Alright, I like the second chapter episode better than the first one. I mean, and it's a bit difficult to say because, of course, when you're making a story, you cannot just simply jump into the meat and bones of the story. You need to have like a build-up. And I kind of felt that the first episode was way too slow. Not in a bad kind of way, where it was like, oh, it's light reading. But then the episode 2 is like, oh, okay, there's It's actually fights and shit. Because it kind of goes what I said, that I was thinking, oh, this should be a book. This could be a book. But it's like, well, I think it would be better if it was a comic book. If it includes like such descriptions of of battles. Because I mean, writing a live visual novel is very different from writing a what you want to call it, a shonen, an action type of story. The description, the choreography, things like that. It requires a certain type of mindset to do so. I'm not saying the two things cannot coexist, but but from the perception of the first episode, it felt more like, oh, okay. As a world, of course, it's going to be military and whatever, but the main focus seems to be like. Sorry, I'm going to lower the volume just a bit more. I don't have the brain cells to to hear the music and think. So yeah, like the first episode felt like, oh, it's a whimsical war with whimsical magic. There's of course military and whatever, but the main focus seems to be like Michi and Yuki and themselves and whatever they know about the Scorchfarer event, the how they can solve it, things like that, and the mysteries of the magic when they are doing. However, on the second episode, then we go further into Vin and the whole military part of the world, which I don't mind. I mean, I'm not saying they both cannot coexist, but what I'm saying is that the perception of the product as a whole, because it's like, oh, okay, it's light reading, but then it's like, oh no, there's action. Again, I'm not saying it cannot coexist, but let's say if the Scorchfarer was done already, all of the chapters were done, all the story was done. How would you describe the visual novel? I'm not saying it's impossible to sell or that it's a bad thing. I'm just saying that the first expectations were like that, which I mean, I guess it's kind of like when people say that, oh, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. The first part of JoJo is very like a novel. It's very like, oh, the story of two brothers that are not brothers, and one of them is just trying to sabotage the main inheritor of the Joestar legacy. But then Dio turns into a vampire, and then it turns into a shonen in a similar way, which makes a lot of people say that, oh, just skip part 1 and part 2, even though part 2 is more into the action part of JoJo. I mean, despite everything, I still love part 1, alright? I don't know, I mean, I'm not saying it's a bad thing to do, or like you shouldn't do it, but it's just like the first expectations. But anyways, they can do whatever they want. Now, I guess the story itself, I like the whole like the world building. Like I said, I like the world and I would like to see it more. And we saw more of it, which I like. The whole time I was reading this, I was thinking of, oh, if you were to make this visual novel into a 3D project, I was thinking, oh, it could look like this, it could move like this, you could have move it like this. Not even like changing into like a 3D type of novel. Just thinking of, oh, you say the backgrounds will be 3D with this type of art style. Not saying they should. I'm just thinking about myself. What I'm trying to say is the world is rich enough, so it makes you think how things look outside of what you are actually just looking. It makes you ponder more. But this time they show you a lot more, so it didn't feel like, oh, I wish to see more type of deal. If that makes sense. I remember saying, oh, there was not a lot of CGI art on this one. Everything went into the backgrounds, but no, everything went into the last part of the second episode, which I'm fine. Alright, I mean it's alright. However, the only thing that it makes me think is that, I mean, the quality ramped up a lot. It makes me feel that maybe they need to go back to the first episode and maybe implement some of the type of animations they did into from the second episode. I mean, it's not like there was action on the first episode, but certain like animations could be done. Like for example, they had like I don't even know what you call them, but like close up of certain actions in like squares. The spear being thrown, the spear hitting the floor, someone jumping, that type of video. Like maybe you can show that those type of animation on the first episode. Look, I know it's kind of like a forbidden rule of going back to redo or do certain things, but I think it will benefit the visual novel, especially for new people just jumping in. Because it's kind of like, oh, I can expect this type of dynamic use of the medium for the rest of the visual novel, instead of just waiting until the second episode for it to pick up like that. I'm not saying they need to blow the project into just redoing the first episode or redoing parts, but maybe just, you know, throw a bone here and there. Speaking of that, on the first part of the second episode, there were a couple of places where, for example, where only there were like a few backgrounds. I'm not going back to the backgrounds, but hear me out. They were like playing, they were having like that play date with Lua, Amber, and U, and they were talking about the playground, and there was no playground background to accompany the scene. I know they probably knew this, and I'm pretty sure they knew someone was going to point it out, but I'm pointing it out. I mean, of course, right? I mean, it's one thing that can be put later on, like you're saying, but it needs to be said regardless. It will be nice if they put like the backgrounds to accompany those scenes, which was an issue that I had on episode 1, which was remediate 90% of the time on episode 2. There were a couple of scenes where they didn't have it, but you know, we saw a lot more. Again, there were less CGI scenes on this one. There were a lot of CGI scenes just at the end, which I guess it means to say, I'm glad they put a lot of CGI scenes and animations on the battle scenes, but I think they should also include similar type of animated scenes onto the, let's call it, the mundane aspects of the characters. You know, they're walking around, they're buying things, they're talking about each other, which I mean, I think it needs a bit more dynamism. It needs to be more dynamic. I mean, it's alright, if it was like that. But since we know you can do it, why not do it? I know it's a bit annoying, and usually, again, it's kind of like a forbidden concept just to go back to what is already done and just touch it up a little. But I still would recommend to do so. The story. Well, I really like it this time around. I mean, I think it was more straightforward to what was happening instead of being like, oh, something's happening. Well, I guess someone else is going to deal with that. It was the meat and bones of the situation. I like the action segment. The developers or the social media handler left a reply saying that they had a couple of things that they needed to fix, and they're probably going to be fixed after I'm done with the playthrough. Whatever it was, either I didn't see it or I did saw it, or I don't know. But if you ask me what it was, I wouldn't be able to tell you. Guess we'll know later. But it's one of those things that if your design has a flaw and the user doesn't notice, well, it's convenient while you go and fix it. But well, I'm glad they are, you know, cautious of their own product. It's like, oh, we didn't do this, we're going to go back and fix it. I mean, I don't know what else much to say, because when I finished the first chapter, I had like certain expectations, and like, okay, well, this could meet certain expectations, this could be helped with this could help with that. But I think all of my expectations were just blown out of the water with the second episode. Like, oh, we have animated cutscenes, we have like CGI, animated backgrounds, animated, well, a lot of things. More of a dynamic use of the visual novel medium, because when these appear like as a CG image, it's like, oh, okay, that's nice. They are taking risks. They are being bold, which is good. Again, I like the creepy part with Nave, and I think it would have been nice if if it creeped out the viewer a bit more. Just make the veil just slide from top, and it's like oh, and then you show the CG of Ika and Agnes just seeing Nave creeping, which scary. I like it. So what else? All right, I said I was going to talk about this, and then it's like I better talk about it at the end. And I mean, I don't know, and I don't want to be an asshole, alright, but I'm going to point it out. I don't know what type of licensing you have with the music, or your musician, or your scorer, or what you want to call it. But every time I upload a Scorchfarer video, I just a week passes and I get copyright claim because of the music. I'm going to say this, I could not care less. I don't mind. YouTube is not my main income. But it kinda makes me worry as a health of the visual novel itself. Why? Because I mean, like I said, YouTube is not my main source of income, so if you copyright my video, I don't care. I raise an eyebrow, but that's about it. But I'm thinking, what if bigger YouTubers cover your visual novel and they make an entire, video editing talking about your visual novel only to get copyright claim by the music? And then they are like, oh, they are. I 100% guarantee, if not 99.99% guarantee, they are also going to point that out. They're probably going to be like, hey, I edited this video, it's talking about this visual novel, but I had to take out the music because it's copyrighted. I mean, like I said, as a game itself, I mean, you play it, you hear the music is fantastic. But if you're a content creator talking about this game, it's going to be like a little like stone in the road. Which can be a stone in the road for the growth of the visual novel. Like I said, I mean, it's not like I'm going to starve of hunger because this videos got copyrighted, but I see it as a detriment to the growth of on social media for your product. So again, I'm not aware which type of contract you have with your musician, because I mean, maybe it was like that okay, I'm going to give you a price, but I'm going to keep the full rights of the music. So if someone uses the music for something else, I'm just going to copyright claim it. I mean, at least the musician doesn't take the video down, which is a positive. Is the silver lining, I'm going to say better. But I mean, maybe you want to consider that. Again, I'm not sure what type of contract you did with the guy, because it could have been like that. That oh, I'm going to give you a a fair price if you let me keep the copyright. Where if you kept the full copyright of the song, it's going to be more expensive. Or I don't know, but still, I had to mention it. And I'm going to repeat it once again. For me, I don't mind, but maybe someone else covering this and it's a bigger YouTuber, either they are going to mention it or they are not going to cover it because of the music. I find the second case rare, but I hear it sometimes happening. Sometimes it's like, oh, I was going to talk about this game or whatever, but they are a bit vicious with the copyright, so I'm not going to. Again, not the worst thing in the world, because I mean the game itself survives regardless of social media. Well, again, not the worst thing ever, but it's not it's not a positive in the growth of the game. What else? Oh yeah, I think hopefully they add like each chapter to like concept art book, just like the first. I keep saying chapter, but fucking Fortnite. Because episode 1 has like the PDF book that you can buy, but the second chapter doesn't. The second episode. Well, you know what I mean. So it would be nice if they make another one. Just put it out there. I'm going to say they probably did not want to do it because it was going to include spoilers. Fair enough. But I would appreciate if they do it. either before before the next chapter drops or when the next chapter drops. Especially me because when I do edits, I usually go to the PDF book and just take the source from there. Well, anyways, so overall, very positive. They increase a lot of the value of the visual novel, and I really like it because I was actually looking forward to what happens next. However, I can see that of course creating those assets is very expensive. When I say very expensive, I'm not necessarily mean into paying the artist or whatever, because this seems to be like a group of people project per se, quote unquote free between themselves. I don't know how you want to say it, but when I say expensive, it's like it takes a lot of time that could be spent doing something else. So yeah, a lot of like art was done for the fight scenes, which I mean, I'm glad they did alright because I mean, fight scenes without much to see or look at, it's kind of like, oh yeah, I'm going to use my imagination to do that. Which I mean, anyone's imagination, it's up to interpretation, of course. Where if you do it yourself, it's like this is how it looks like. Well, anyway, so yeah, net positive. I like it a lot better than the first episode. I'm not saying the first episode is bad, but I was thinking, oh, it's going to be a lot of light reading. And I'm glad they are also taking more dynamic approach with the visual novel. I think I'm pretty sure they do this, but I think it would be nice if you guys also look at other visual novels to see how they do dynamic elements for the characters on screen and try to apply similar things. I see they did a lot more because the characters had more like expressions, sound effects, and things like that, and I'm glad they do it. But maybe just don't be afraid to be more dynamic with your characters on screen. On the standstill CGs, because the dynamic CGs, you know, when they were attacking, jumping, things like that, they were great. But since most of the most of a visual novel they use the character standing still, maybe want to consider like how to make it a bit more dynamic to look at. It doesn't have anything crazy, right? But you know, it would be nice to have. Well, anyways, another thing, maybe just again, I will always say this, but maybe give us the option to like increase the darkness of the text box because sometimes the backgrounds are too bright for the text, which I don't mind. I mean, the backgrounds are great, but maybe just, you know, give us the option to do that. Make a darker text box. And I'm not sure. I swear that maybe you don't want to do this, but I'm going to keep saying it just because I'm going to keep complaining. Maybe change the font time for the reading part to something else. There are some very beautiful fonts that you can license and are not too expensive that you might consider. I mean, I'm not saying do it right away. Maybe you just want to test it out, see how it looks, how it reads. But I would recommend it because I think maybe it's just me. Maybe the font causes a bit of issue with reading. Well, and also maybe add sound effects for the text boxes too. Maybe a clicking sound every time you move to the next box. And maybe not necessarily one also for when the text is being typed out. Not necessarily, but you know, will be. But I'm glad. I mean, a lot of things were improved in the second chapter, so hopefully the next chapter will improve on whatever other shortcomings it had, which were not many and not very important to be honest. Because I mean, I see that if the game has something bad, that it takes you away from the experience, then it's very bad. But if it has bad, but it's like whatever, it doesn't take you away from the experience, then you know it can be easily fixed. The typos, I don't mind really. I don't care. I know a lot of people out there online go like, oh, you got type like that? Oh, it's like, who cares? Just if the solution is just if you opening the text box and fixing it, then it's not a big deal. Where if the solution is to rewrite the entire script, then yeah, then that's a bigger problem. But you know, a couple of typos here and there is not going to kill a thing. It can be easily fixed. And well, I mean, yeah. I was thinking that probably the first episode uh, was harder to develop because they had to develop what type of art styles they're going for, the type of characters, type of story, the engine they were using. So a lot, I'm going to say a lot of the development time I presume went into just building the thing to be viable. Where on the second episode, it was like, okay, we already have the characters, the way the story is gonna go, the type of story we're having, the type of engine we have. So it's just into making the content itself. So I presume that's why we have more like content for the game itself. But anyways, I'm rambling. Not positive. I like it. A lot of things that had issues with got like mostly solved. Well, anyways, with that said, I think that's it right there. I don't think I have anything else to cover. Um, well, yeah. Story so far so good, and well, I mean, yeah, I mean everything seems to be in the right track because before I was thinking, oh well, I hope they fix this because it kinda is probably not going to help them in the long run. But it's like, okay, well, seems to be on the right track. Like again, when you feel when things happen that take you out of the experience, then it's like, oh well, it's not good. But when you're just engaged with what you're watching or reading, it's like, okay, then the elements within are good. That it keeps you within the world. I think all of the story elements have been great. Uh, However, like it always felt to me that, and I think I said it before, that I felt like the characters were a lot of time just mingling, just doing whatever stuff instead of like the story. And I mean, of course, you need to like develop the characters so you actually care for them. It cannot be just the entire just meat and bones of the story and just expect, oh yeah, this guy, he died, she died, and be like, oh yeah, I care a lot. I'm trying to think what movie, game, franchise, whatever, did something like, oh, the entire story is, I don't know, the war, and you barely get to know the characters and you actually care for them, but can't think anything on top of my mind. Like I saw Gladiator too, and I think it wasn't a lot of like the lives of the characters, but just enough so you're like, oh, okay, so this is where the story is going. Just to care enough. I mean, but that's them. And well, also I guess I need to mention it because it's just on the top of my head and it's not leaving, so I might as well just say it. When when it was just being watching just Amber and Wu just dating, it's like, are we really watching this man just getting getting cocked live on stream? And I was thinking, yeah, didn't that kind of happen like at the beginning of episode 1 when Xiao just did that weird pink smoke and just put Yuki in a trance and Miki was just there just watching in the background. It's a little awkward. And it's like, I felt a little awkward here too, especially when Bing got fucking molded and the first thing that Wu did was go with Amber. It's like, oh, okay. Look, I get it, alright. I mean, I get it because it's like, oh, Bean is just a guy from the military, so of course they're going to take care of the commander, the head of the operation, or the higher ups, which U is. But since the whole story was kind of like, oh, I still kind of care for her, I'm going to give my life away for her. And then U is like, oh, I can't believe Bean is throwing his life away for me because he loves me. Now I'm going to go with Amber, spend. It's like, I don't know. It just throws me off a little. Like, I get it. I mean, it's just military, but it's just like, since the whole story is being built around like this, it's kind of like, it feels kind of weird. Again, I mean, if that's how you want to write Bean and the characters and the world, then you do you. Don't think about me. But I'm just going to point it out. It's kind of like, oh, poor bastard, poor son of a bitch. Well, I guess that also, well, because I mean, not every character can be just goody two shoes, moral compass, whatever. But because characters are going to be imperfect or do things that you may not like, I mean, it's bound to happen. which makes them more real. But I don't know. It also makes seem to be. It also makes look being like he's just the type of guy who just sits in the corner and watch. If you know what I mean. Which is kind of like, oh well, it just throws the guys off. But I mean, that's just me. That's my perspective. And again, see, if we're talking about nitty and gritty to it, it's like neither of them have like a romantic responsibility with each other. They are divorced. They clear all that. You know, the only responsibility they have with each other is just like the military aspect of it. Just they have to take care of each other because they are part of a unit. However, like I said, since Bean is kind of seen like, oh, I still care about maybe romantically. It's kind of like, oh, poor guy just taking the back seat on this one. Just kind of feels like that. Again, could just be me, and you don't have to rewrite anything, but it's just how it's looking. That's what I'm saying. If you want to write like that, then do so, alright? Whichever the case, I think that's all. So, well, yeah, that's all. Thank you so much for watching. Guess I'll see you when I see you, everyone. Take care. Remember to stay safe. Brush your teeth, floss your teeth, and well, guess we'll see you. Was it 2 years for this episode? Because then it's going to be, well, I guess I see you on 2026 or something. So, well, guess I'll see you until then. Bye now.